All right, let's turn towards our market update. And tonight we're going to take a look at the legal market update. We have invited a local attorney, Julie Anderson. She is a eviction attorney and she has been out there in the trenches since COVID started fighting on our behalf. And she knows what's going on around some of these questions like, can I even get into the courthouse? Or are evictions being halted because the doors are chained shut? Or that because people are calling in on the virtual calls and just completely halting proceedings? Is the eviction moratorium unconstitutional? Has it been extended? If I don't want to evict my tenant, but they want to get rental assistance, what can I do? There's just a lot of questions. So I invited Julie to join us for a short update tonight. So Julie, I know you're out there, and welcome to our meeting.
Hi, I'm Julie Anderson. I'm an attorney. I'm the managing member of Anderson and Associates. I practice law in Kansas and Missouri, sometimes in Nebraska, and I focus my practice exclusively on representing real estate investors. We have a transactional department that we're working on titles and helping people buy and sell. We have an eviction department, a foreclosure department, a collection department, and our ever popular litigation department, when real estate investors are suing people and being sued, essentially. I'm also the commissioner and the chairman of the Land Bank of Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm here to talk with you just a quick market update. I'm going to answer 6 questions and hope that I'll still have some time to answer any questions that you might have. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is this CDC order? On September 4th of 2020, the Center for Disease Control, partially through the former president, entered an order temporarily halting residential evictions for covered tenants. And what this really means, and the purpose of it, was that they would prevent the spread of COVID-19 in shared living circumstances. They were trying to prevent homelessness, and they were trying to prevent the spread of COVID-19 allegedly from state to state or location to location. If a tenant wants to be covered, they have to fill out a declaration under the penalty of perjury. So they have to say in writing and give their landlord a statement that says they are trying to seek government assistance, they make less than $99,000 a year, that they've experienced a substantial loss of income or extraordinary medical expenses due to COVID-19, that they are attempting to make partial payments, and that they would become homeless in the event they would be evicted. They have to acknowledge that rent will remain due and owing after the moratorium is lifted. And again, they have to say this under the penalty of perjury, which means it should be an honest statement. All 7 criteria must be met for a tenant to remain in a property without paying rent during this moratorium. The order does not prevent you from filing evictions for any reason. It does not prevent you from evicting a tenant based on their criminal activity, their violations of the lease, or any violations of the law that have to do with the health or the safety of themselves or the other residents, building code violations, or just breach of contracts or holding over after the expiration of a lease. I think that's one of the most common questions I'm getting right now, is that people are saying, like, I can't file an eviction. I heard I can't do anything. That's not the truth. You can move forward. It's just you have to stop if you receive a declaration. The order has some pretty stiff criminal penalties. If you violate this order and just kick people out without a court order, or you receive a declaration and you proceed to ignore it, you could go to jail for up to 1 year, be placed on 1 year of supervised release, and fined up to $250,000. So the federal government essentially meant serious business. The second question that we're receiving right now is that we're hearing kind of this buzz about the new case that came down on February 25th, where Judge John Barker in the United States District Court in the Eastern District of Texas ruled in favor of landlords against the CDC and the U.S. Department of Health, saying that the CDC has exceeded their constitutional authority. I couldn't agree with the decision more. We have been kind of marching around on behalf of lawyers in my position saying this really feels like a government taking of your property. They're essentially choosing people that get to live in your asset without paying you. And while they are some pretty big penalties there if you don't follow their moratorium. So what this case had to do with was whether or not the CDC, a federal agency, has legislative powers that were granted to it by Congress under Article 1 of the Constitution. It was a very long decision. I've read most of the words in it a couple of times, and it's a real snoozer. If you wanted to learn a lot about agency law, that would be an interesting place to start. The CDC essentially said that under the Commerce Clause in the Constitution, they can regulate commerce among the states, and that they are authorized to essentially put this moratorium all over the country. Traditionally, the Supreme Court has said that the Commerce Clause has to do with the channels of commerce, how we move goods and how we move money between the states, and your freedom to travel between the states. The court in Texas ultimately said that this broad interpretation of the Commerce Clause was just complete overreaching, and that this is illegal police powers. Therefore, the CDC has exceeded its constitutional authority. The CDC has now appealed this decision. One interesting thing, a lot of landlords are calling saying this is great news. And I mean, it was a great step forward, but I really want to let you know that the judge in Texas did not enter an injunction. That means even in Texas, this is not controlling authority. No judge is not enforcing the moratorium at this time in Texas or anywhere in the country. And he kind of said this hypothetical thing where he says, well, I expect the CDC to listen to me. Well, I mean, that's not a real ruling. So I don't want landlords to get too excited about this ruling. I'm every day telling landlords that case does not apply to your case. You were not the plaintiff in that case, so it doesn't really apply to you. I know nobody wants to hear that right now, but nothing about that case really impacts your rights and your cases and your properties at this time. It was an interesting intellectual exercise for us if we wanted to read about the Constitution, but that's about as much authority as I think it has right now. The third question I'm getting is, are evictions happening, or are the protests at the courthouse, various courthouses, and the calls stopping progress? I think many judges are pretty much tired of this horseplay, and the evictions are happening even in the city. It's just, I want you to know that there are significant delays. We are seeing delays from the clerks in issuing summons. We are seeing significant continuances of court dates, and various sheriffs and civil process servers are really just continuing, kind of kicking this can down the road. And we are seeing an uptick in solicitations from pro bono attorneys standing outside of the courtrooms, handing out these declarations. I obviously think it's relatively unfair that they're kind of handing these out like candy, not necessarily just for the people that need the protection, but just anybody who's present. I'm getting the question over and over, I thought we couldn't evict. I mean, that's just not true. If you have tenants that are significantly delinquent, I am recommending that you move forward in exercising your rights. If you receive a declaration, that doesn't mean that we cannot move forward. It means that you cannot lock them out until this moratorium is lifted. As of right now, President Biden has set the deadline for the moratorium at March 31st. I am constantly wondering whether or not that will be the final extension of this moratorium. And I have a magic 8-ball. So anytime anyone calls me, I just look at it and I'm like, outlook good. Oh, outlook cloudy. I don't think anybody really knows what the president is going to do. Congress is not really sending us any signals that they intend to extend it, which I think is somewhat hopeful for us. The next question I'm getting is, are the assistance programs paying off? How do we document delinquent rents without starting evictions? So yes, we are seeing a pretty significant amount of rent relief coming in the last few weeks. On the Missouri side, we're having the best luck, I think, with the United Way. And I think the county is going to be refunding the United Way, and they seem to be doing a pretty good job there. On the Kansas side, we're seeing some good money come in through the Kansas Eviction Prevention Program called KEP. And they ran out of funds, but I think they are now putting in some more federal funds into that. Just for where you can find these resources. So my website is MO for Missouri, KS for Kansas, LAW for the law, so MOKSlaw.com. I am constantly updating daily the tab called Tenant Resources. So you can direct your tenants to that part of my website saying, or you can print it off. Honestly, I think you should help them print it off, talk with them. As new rent relief programs are coming in, I'm going to be continuously posting there. And I plan on just, again, putting as many links up there as I can. I've also drafted under our Forms tab a number of notices that you can use. They're in Word format, so you can put your letterhead at the top, your business name, make them your own. I don't know that you should change the substance, but you can if you really wanted to. And it's a notice to your tenants telling them, like, here's how much rent you owe for the purpose of getting them to cooperate with you in getting rent relief. So I have one for both Missouri and Kansas, and that's under mokslaw.com, forms, COVID-19 forms. And a lot of great resources for landlords there under that forms tab. My final kind of comments are, I'm cautioning people, and in the last couple of weeks, we've had a decision that was handed down in Georgia and has been upheld by the Court of Appeals that wasn't very hopeful for landlords. And it's kind of a cautionary tale for landlords that are kind of out there winging it on their own. And it essentially said that there was a landlord who was accepting partial payments over the last 16-month period and really sat on their rights to file an eviction and did not really enforce their lease. And the Court of Appeals has said, you know what, you snooze, you lose. You no longer have the right to collect rent because you've acted so far outside of the scope of the terms of your contract that you've done nothing to reserve your rights under that contract. So for those of you out there that are just kind of sitting and waiting and seeing and not really documenting and not wanting to do much to see, will I get rent relief? What will happen? You know, texting your tenants and not really using valid legal notices. I really want to see that you're using a good non-waiver provision in your leases saying, you know, if for some reason I don't enforce my lease, that doesn't mean I relinquish my rights to enforce my lease. If you don't have that provision in your lease, I have drafted you some notices that kind of make up for it. And so the first one is that if you're going to have your tenants repaying, I have a repayment agreement under the COVID-19 forms that you can use. Again, download it, put your letterhead on it. And it's a good repayment agreement that just reinforces that even though you're going to take payments outside of the scope of your lease, you're not waiving your right to collect all of the amounts due. Also, another tip I have is you really have got to read the fine letter print of these relief programs. Some of them are pretty punitive to landlords. They're saying, like, here's a couple months of rent, but you can no longer collect rent or enforce your right to collect rent in the future. I'm seeing some up to 90 days, up to 120 days. So essentially, if somebody owed you 6 months and you take 2 months, they don't have to pay you for the another 3 months. So does it make sense to do that? I mean, at least you need to go in with open eyes, knowing what you're getting into. I'm going to be updating and writing blogs all along the way, and you'll see I've been doing that about different programs that are available. Right now, I think so many of them are coming at us that, I mean, it's hard for me to even know what some of these programs are every day, but at least I'm going to provide you with links to that. Also, if for any reason you do terminate a lease and you accept money from a rent relief program or just otherwise, please use a notice reserving your rights under your termination notices. And I have a free form on the website also under just landlord forms. I know we have very few minutes, maybe 3 or 4. So do you have questions that I can answer quickly?
I have a couple. And I think you've probably answered a lot of them, but if somebody is buying a house from somebody else and that renter is behind on rent because of COVID, you can evict them once the eviction moratorium is passed, but basically they're stuck with them until that's over with, correct?
I mean, okay, a couple things matter. So if you're buying a property and there's people living in the property, my first question is there a lease? So if the lease has terminated, we can file a different type of eviction. That's a violation of the contract and the moratorium does not apply. If the lease is in good standing, in the middle of the term, then if they give you a declaration, can you not do a lockout? That doesn't mean we can't file. A lot of my clients are getting attention and rent relief because I'm working with agencies and I'm working with the other attorneys. In some ways, those cases in which we're filing are considered the more emergent cases because those are the tenants that are at risk of being evicted, which is why we're working with agencies and why we're working with a lot of other lawyers to try and get these issues resolved. So again, just sitting there and saying, what I really don't want investors to feel right now is that you're just victimized and you just have to house people for free indefinitely. You do have rights. We can move forward. It just kind of depends on what the documents that you inherited would be.
I sat down with the lady from MHDC and she was working on what they are offering for the new federal funds for Missouri. And she is of the assumption that Kansas City, Missouri's money, as well as Kansas's money, will have the same, that you would be able to go back and file for back rents even after an eviction has processed. If the tenants still, they still have, whether you put them out or not, they think you can still go back and get back rent if you can get the tenant to participate so that you can mark the eviction satisfied. But what if you've had tenants that are delinquent and want to move out? Can you file for unpaid rents even if they moved out because they owed it to you?
Yeah, what I'm always looking at, and one reason why I encourage people to consider filing sooner than later. Once they move, if they do not give you a new address and you do not know where they are, I cannot get them served. So when they're living in your property, I can get what they call personal jurisdiction, meaning I can get them served with a piece of paper because we know where they are. They're living in your property. And once I get personal jurisdiction, no matter when I take that judgment, even if they move out, I can take a money judgment. My biggest fear for landlords that are fearful or are kind of sitting on their rights right now is that I won't be able to find these tenants if they skip out on you. And then you've got incredibly large bills. And if I can't get them served, there's nothing I can do to help you. You're going to just need to write it off when we know where they are.
Yeah. If they have more questions, maybe we can do this again for a longer presentation, or can they reach out to you and your staff at mokslaw.com?
Yeah, we're answering questions every day, all day for real estate investors. I'm also happy to come back and talk with you as things progress regarding rent relief. We do hope there's going to be some pretty significant movement here in the next 30 days.